Landmines and jellyfish. Welcome back to Knives, I guess. And no, I'm not 4 cups stacked on top of each other in a trench coat. Who told you that? They lied. But do me a favor and hit that like button or else. And for the last week we've been carrying the Divo Growler XL prototype. So let's take a look at what we're holding because it'll bother you if I don't. And you know I love you. So first things first, and most importantly, the pocket clip is tip up, which is the Lord's carry. We have got the black and purple camo carbon. The pocket clip is reversible. We got a thumb hole. Let's flick the hole. And we have got 4 inches of D2 steel on this bad boy. Now, those of you that have been around for a minute know, and if you haven't seen this, before, I am an enormous fan of the original Divo Growler. After doing Cardboard Slayer and everything with that, I am so in love with that. It's a top 3 in my collection. This is the Divo Growler, but bigger. It's bigger. And of course, you guys that have been around know I love my knives that have 4-inch plus blades, the comically oversized stuff. So this is just grabbing me by the short and curlies so hard. Oh my God. But, you know, when I go to Blade Show, I like to drop by the Divo table and pick up a prototype every year. And this beauty was sitting there in the case, and I went ahead and scooped it up for 130 bucks. So I did ask Kevin while I was there. He is Lefty EDC. That's his YouTube channel, and Divo is his company. Go check him out. But I asked him about it, and he said they were in production, not released yet, and that they thought the blade steel was going to be 154 cm, I believe, but I could be wrong. Now, I emailed him and asked, you know, is there a projected potential timeline for the release on it? Like, what's the blade material going to be? What are the finishes? All that stuff. And he never got back to me. I don't know if he just missed the email or what, unfortunately, but I tried to get us some more information about it, but that's all we know right now. So I was delighted at the prospect of carrying this for the week, and I was also afraid I was going to drop it, ding it, damage it, whatever you have, because the prototypes are like the holiest of holies to me. I like chasing down prototypes and adding those to the collection, and my prototypes are like the most highly valued part of my collection, short of gifts from friends. So this thing is definitely going in the drawer of stuff that's too nice for this channel, but you know, while I carried it for the week, you know, I expected it was good. I expected it to be a pretty good week. Words are hard, and it's somehow your fault. But, you know, I expected it to be a pretty good week, and it was indeed a pretty good week. You know, the thing, one of the first things to point out, this thing centrifugal opens. It centrifugal opens quite well, and with the weight on the blade and the beef on it, it opens with some authority. I enjoyed that. I did that about 500,000 times while I was walking around work, and every time I had to open something up or cut something, snap, whip that thing right open. So I love a centrifugal open, and this does it very, very well. The edge on this thing, however, was very, very dull. That's not a bad thing. It was obviously put to work before it was taken to Blade Show because it's a prototype. And I didn't sharpen it because I like to leave my prototypes as I got them. But like trying to cut the plastic wrap off of the pallets, you know, it's again, if you got a good edge, it'll go through the middle where there's a bunch of layers pretty nicely. And at the bottom where there's one layer, a great edge will go through it like you're cutting air. This thing just tore everything. It ripped, it tore, especially in the front half of the blade right here. If I got back to the back part where it wasn't used as much, it did okay. But all the work done right here on this end was nasty. It was toast. So I did feed her some cardboard, and it sliced very well. The beefiness of this thing belies how well it slices because it's still some fairly thin blade stock for something this large. And you've got a very tall flat grind into a small flat right here, and then you got your swedge right here. So this thing still slices like a bucket of hot damn, and it did a pretty good job cutting the cardboard up. It didn't give me a lot of fuss. The edge was still just sharp enough to get away with that. And we'll take a look at that on the edge sharpness tester a little bit later. But you know, it's just it's a little bit of a shame, but not a problem that it was dull, simply because it was a used prototype when I got it. Now, this thing has got a very thin, flat profile for something this beefy. Like, that is a pretty flat profile and pretty thin on the scales. And it helped getting it into and out of the pocket. Like, it made it a fairly easy carry. However, this thing still took up a bunch of room in the pocket. Like, this is a lot of real estate, and you know, this much real estate being taken up in a pocket. It's noticeable whenever you're trying to get stuff out of the pocket, because a lot of stuff was being pushed off to the side or getting caught under here, and it made it real hard to dig anything out around it, which, again, that's the compromise you make when you carry big, crazy stuff like this. That is the compromise you make when you carry this big, oversized stuff. And when I was putting it in the pocket, I would put it in the pocket and it would get stuck, pressed up against stuff that was in the pocket already. So I'd have to move stuff around to get it in the pocket, because that is still a good bit of length right there. It's a bit of length on the scales, and it definitely took up some space, because you got a little less, like 5¼ inches, like 5¼ inches of total overall length when closed, and that is a lot of space. Now, again, the flat nature of this thing, it was still easy to carry. It's just you had those two little problems right there. And, it's again, I would be more upset with it, but look at the size of this thing. Now, the one thing that I did run into that I was really heartbroken by was the pocket clip bananaed out of shape pretty bad. It got hung up on something and it bananaed out pretty bad. Now, I thought this was titanium and it wouldn't be a problem, but no, this thing is steel. So it bananaed out of shape. I go back to the truck, I get my T8 driver, and pray to God that it's not Loctited to all holy hell. And no, it wasn't Loctited, so I was able to get it removed, get it straightened back out, and put it back on here, but I can still feel a little bit of waviness behind from where it didn't bend back to exactly how it was from the factory. And that centering is real good on this. That centering on that's real good. But I was heartbroken to see it bent like that, because I wanted to leave it as I found it. And, I could have used the optional wire clip that he gave me. However, I wanted to keep this clip on it because I like the way it looks. I love a good wire pocket clip. I don't have a lot of them, so it's kind of a toss-up. Which one do I want more? I decided to stick with this one, and of course it's got some wear and tear on it from before I got it. Like I said, this thing was put to work at some point in its life. So, at the very least, I was able to straighten the pocket clip back out enough to be happy with it. It's a little wavy now. I showed this to a coworker. Who's becoming a knife guy, but not quite there yet. I'm still working on corrupting him further. But I showed him, and I crack it open, and I hand it to him, or I let him crack it open. But he looks at it, he's like, Jesus Christ, that thing's huge. And I'm ashamed to say, I am deeply, profoundly ashamed to say that I did not yell giggity. My mind was somewhere else, and I realized I could have yelled giggity about 15 seconds later when it was too late. I'm sorry, you guys. I know I let you down, but I missed that opportunity. It definitely impressed him, and he loved the black and purple camo carbon on this. And if you haven't seen this camo carbon in real life, the way that chatoyancy is happening, ooh, there's a $4 word. But the way the chatoyancy is going down happens in real life too. Like, it looks like this in real life, only you get to see more purple on it. There's a bit more purple on it than shows up on camera, which is really nice. And I'm hoping I've got a unique colorway. The Divo Fireball prototype we got with the red and black camo carbon, that's the only one that came in that colorway. So I'm hoping I've got a unique colorway here, and I'm hoping to God I can get a production version when it comes out. I'd love to see this in 80s camo, because I would snap that up. And because I don't know when it's supposed to come out, I am keeping a close eye on it, and I'm actually reading the White Mountain Knives emails. And if you want to pick up some Divo stuff when it releases, go sign up for White Mountain Knives newsletter and keep an eye on it. That's where he sells these things, and when they drop, they sell out like within 20 minutes. That Fireball, oh my God, that was so stressful to pick that up, because it was like open the White Mountain page, refresh, buy now. And I'm probably going to have to go through that again to get one of these in production, but I want to carry it, and I want to do Cardboard Slayer with it and see if it does. Well, we've carried it basically, but I do want to do Cardboard Slayer on one of these with the right blade steel and something that I don't feel bad about sharpening, and see if it does just as well as the regular Growler did, because that regular Growler, oh my God, again, top 3 in my collection, top 3. But, like I said, go check out Lefty EDC on YouTube, drop a sub for him to keep an eye out for stuff like this. He shows off prototypes once in a while and kind of shows you what he has coming out eventually. So definitely check him out, but I can't think of anything else to say about this. So all that being said, oh, and by the way, I almost forgot. Let's get out the electronic edge sharpness tester. I'll show you just how dull that edge was, Because I think we were up over 300, which is a pretty rough edge before we started carrying this thing. And of course, you guys provided the electronic sharpness tester through your super chat donations, your channel memberships, what have you. Always grateful for that support. Thank you so much. But if you haven't seen one of these before, let's get this test clip out. If you haven't seen one of these before, the way it works is it measures the number of grams of force it takes to cut through the wire on this calibrated test clip. The lower the number, the better. All right, a really good solid edge, like a good edge, is like in the 120s. But let's see where we're at on the part that had the hardest time cutting. .364. All right, that 364 is a very rough number. After I get done sharpening something myself, I like to see somewhere in the 120s or below, which you're hitting a double-edged safety razor territory when you get there. Like you're starting to get into that. You get down to 100, it's basically a double-edged safety razor. 120 to 140 is going to be a utility cutter blade, a utility razor. But that is very, very, very dull. Like I said, it was put to work before I got my hands on it, and it still sliced pretty well in spite of the number being that high. This thing definitely got beat on a little bit. But I almost forgot to show you guys that, so there you have it. And let's go back to the video. Thanks for looking at my crap. Subscribers, you guys are awesome. Y'all keep coming in. I appreciate you so much. If you haven't subscribed, please do. We got our live streams, regular videos. There's plenty of activities. Comments, I love some feedback. Let me know what you think about this thing, or if you're going to try to scoop one up. Of course, I've got my Amazon shop linked off, and you don't have to use it, but it's the easiest way I've found to show you some of the cool stuff that I have found over the last couple of months here. But all that being said, y'all have a nice day.